Welcome everyone to a special episode of Kiwi Talks. My guests today are a group of passionate guys who have been working on a special project to compose and edit music for the Saiyan and Namek sagas of Dragon Ball Z in the style of the iconic Faulconer Productions soundtrack. So I'd like to introduce, and I got to get this right, Joseph HOLASKA, Nick VERSCHOOR, Marcelo'S, and RAKEEM DELWIN. And you guys are known as the Dragon Ball Z Faulconer remix team. Is that the official title?
That's our moniker. Yeah.
Cool. So the first thing I'd like to ask is how this all came about, how this project came into fruition. Who wants to answer first?
I suppose I will. Well, it's kind of like a project that that's been on and off for me, that I sort of started and killed and put on a backseat until I met RAKEEM. And RAKEEM, he already had a bit of a resume. He showed me he had several tracks that he painstakingly recreated. And he had an original Alesis. He had a full understanding, grasp of the score. I saw what somebody made. I'm like, wait a minute, this guy gets it. And so I'm like, hey, would you ever be interested in composing for the show? I have this edit I've been trying to make for years, but I've never been able to get a composer to work with me. There have been some failed attempts, but it hasn't been until this year till we really got it off the ground. And then we've really been building a team of composers.
And when you say this year, you do mean 2021, not 2022 now, right?
At the time of this recording, yeah. This has all been going on throughout the majority of 2021. Right.
Okay. And so is that from the beginning of 2021 that this kind of came to fruition?
I want to say it started around May.
Okay.
Around May, yeah.
Remembers it.
Right.
RAKEEM and I teamed up and we started with episode 37, actually, which I guess you could say is like the last episode of the Saiyan Saga, or the first episode of the Namek Saga. But point is, it's right in the middle. And I said, I'm like, this episode is like 90% scored. Would you be able to write in a few cues here and there, put in a couple funny notes here, transition there? Like, do you think you'd be able to do that? And he's like, yeah. And he put together it masterfully, put the final glue that was missing. And he said, hey, would you be willing to do this for 60 more episodes? That's kind of how it sort of got started, because we had such a blast doing that episode.
So how do you decide when to use new music and when to use the Faulconer music for the edit?
The first 35 some episodes all have like rough cuts that I've played and toyed around with. And when I play and toy around with them, I find what tracks work and what fit. And then sometimes there'll be scenes where I'm like, okay, like he needs a new theme. There needs to be something original here. Nothing I'm doing is working here. This works, but this is from the Majin Buu era, so we can't use it. It's just kind of hours of playing around and seeing what works and what doesn't work.
Right. So would the rest of you guys chime in at times and be like, hey, Marcelo, you've already got an edit here, but why don't we compose something original here instead?
Oh, plenty of times.
Yeah? Can you give me an example?
RAKEEM was one of the first people to suggest. There was some point in episode 1 during like the waterfall scene where I used I used a track called Space Room.
Yep.
I think. And it's a nice little track composed by Julius Dobosh for like the early Majin Buu era. But it didn't quite fit. It didn't quite work. And RAKEEM thankfully pointed out, and I say this all the time to the team, because we're a collaborative effort. If you ever find any track that doesn't fit or doesn't quite work, or you'd rather write something original, tell me, let me know. I'll never say no to writing something brand new for the episode.
So the rest of you guys, when you're composing an original piece, how long does that take you roughly, give or take? How many iterations of that same theme will you do over and over? Or will Marcelo be like, nah, do it again?
Sometimes he will, yeah.
Yeah.
But for me, I would say it takes, depending on what the piece is asking for. So if it's a completely original track that's like between 1 and 2 or 1 and infinity amount of minutes, you have to like try out some different things, and then we'll go back in and be like, Marcelo, how does this basic arrangement sound, before we start adding like little sprinkles to it. And then he'll be like, oh, well, I like this. Can you change this or make this longer or take this out? It's too much. And so it's a process. You just keep going back to it until everybody's satisfied.
Right.
Some tracks can definitely take longer than others. There's some tracks that just work like that, and then some tracks we could spend weeks trying to get right.
Can you give me an example?
Well, I don't want to speak for Rakeen, but I know he's had to write 5 different tracks for Raditz over this process, and I know he the hardest was the first one, when he really had to kind of create a musical identity for Raditz, and he found a lot of really great sounds, and we loved the result he came up with. But he really had to reinvent Raditz there, so that took him probably a little while. And then there's a faster action track for Raditz that I thought it would have taken him longer. It took him like 2 days to write that one, and I was like, "Wait, you're already done?" So it depends. It's different for other people.
So,
longest,
sorry, what were you going to say, Joe?
The longest thing that I think we've all found is we have so many sounds from the show that picking the sound takes the longest, figuring out which ones you want to use, which ones work together best. So I did a track in episode 3 that is when Goku and Piccolo arrive on the battlefield to fight Raditz. That one, I knew exactly what sounds I was going to use going in because of the lead up to it. I wrote that in maybe 3 hours total. Other tracks that are shorter than that one's about 45 seconds. Other tracks have taken me a week and a half because you spend a lot of time playing with different sounds, different arrangements, different combinations of sounds until you figure out, okay, these work together. And then, it's such a process to nail down which of these sounds, because there's so many cool sounds that we've identified. And then being able to identify, okay, which ones can you use that still have that early DBZ feel, that you're not getting into the Boo era with some of these, or you're using them in a way that's unique. That's like the coolest way of composing some of these tracks, is just letting the sounds make the music, letting the sounds direct the music, and then you get a much more organic, much more natural result.
Ah, that's interesting. Interesting stuff. So can you give me a bit of a breakdown in terms of the main Raditz theme, how your approach was to that, Rakeen?
Yeah, sure. So that track actually didn't happen first. The first one was the slow one, the slow alien-like one that's in near the beginning of episode 1.
Yeah.
It's like he's still in the space pod and he's flying through space. That whole thing, it's real short, but that one came first, and the original idea for that one was kind of like the basis for the main Raditz theme, the dum 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 dum. I had that in the slow theme at first, and so Marcelo was like, "Can we change this whole thing?" Not in a bad way.
I felt bad about it.
He liked the theme part of it, but he didn't want it for that track. And so I was like, okay, I'm still gonna use this as Raditz riff, I guess, and walking all over the keyboard. But yeah, so I use that. I changed the original slow theme to something else, and then that's basically the basis for all the other Raditz themes. Or like the fast one, I took like just the choir section of the Raditz main theme and then made that into another Raditz theme, but they all connect in some kind of way.
Right.
With the main riff being the major theme.
So any of Raditz's stuff did you do pretty much, Rakeem? Even say, so you might take an original track. So I know I heard the Face Off theme, the dun, 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 and then there'd be the kind of like a choir over the top of it. I think in episode...
That...
Is it 2?
3.
So that was...
3, sorry, yeah.
That was Joe.
Right.
That's actually Joe.
Mm-hmm.
Nice. So how'd that come about, Joe?
We had a version of that face-off theme. It was the Piccolo and Cell iteration of it, and we discussed doing a different version, something that's more consistent with what we're doing for the Saiyan Saga. One of the biggest things we're trying to stick with is thematic consistency within the Saiyan Saga. That involves using that choir that you heard as sort of a tribute to the Wasserman Ocean dub soundtrack, because there's a lot of dark, deep male choir stuff in that. So we're sort of trying to reference that a little bit. And we just talked about, hey, let's do a new original, I called it Face Off Raditz. And, that was how we did it, just implementing those different sounds that are elements from the Raditz theme, because I used what Rakeem wrote and just took pieces of it and then layered that in with the existing Face Off theme, minus the Piccolo and Cell stuff.
Right. And how long did that take to do?
That was probably a couple of days. And I know I sent Marcelo one that had more stuff, and he told me dial it back a little bit. And so I dialed it back a little bit. And then the general process for stuff like that, those we refer to as embellishments, which is where you're layering something onto an existing track. And that could be something as detailed as that, or just a couple little silly notes over Gohan looking all 4 directions before falling in episode 1.
Yeah.
So with stuff like that, I'll usually, or one of us will usually send him various pieces, and then as the editor, he'll look through it and say, okay, this works here. Maybe we don't need this part here. You can pull that off. So it's a really collaborative effort, and we talk about it and whether you want to really make the case for this should be here versus, you're probably right, it doesn't need to be there. But it's a teamwork type of thing.
Because obviously you guys will be incorporating a lot of the music from, say, the Frieza saga in the Saiyan Saga, and especially during the Namek Saga whenever that happens. But not all of that stuff is rippable, right, from the episodes because of the way the Blu-ray or how it's structured in terms of the sound mix. So you'd have to create some of that stuff from scratch, either now or when the time comes. Yeah.
Occasionally, yeah. In episode 3, that was a whole project for like a week. In episode 3, there is one cue we use, which is a painstaking recreation we made from episode, I think, like 119, Frieza's counterattack. 118. Mm-hmm. And there's a small little section where Gohan like attacks Mr. Shu, and then in the TV version, they play like a riff of the main DBZ theme, and it's not available on the Blu-ray. So what we did was we found the highest quality clips we could, and Joe and I worked together on this, where he recreated it painstakingly, whereas I sort of served as quality control, where I was like, okay, those drums need to be a little bit heavier. This is slightly mistimed. You need to mix the space voices a little bit higher, et cetera, et cetera. Like I was just serving as quality control to make sure it was like accurate, because 1, we wanted to recreate that because we just wanted to have it. And 2, we realized like, hey, this really works for this scene. Let's edit it here. Like that whole section was entirely Joe.
Oh, wow. Okay. And how much back and forth was this? Were you doing this via email, phone call? Like,
I mean, chatting.
Messenger.
but mostly Messenger. But I emailed him like the Wave version so he would have it. And I think that when we got up to like version 17 or 18 before we finally said, okay, we're done. This is good.
Yeah. Tiny little things. A lot of little tricks and things were used to make sure it was like 1-to-1.
Yeah. So, Nick, what's some of the stuff that you've worked on so far since you've been on this project? Because you're the new guy.
Yeah, I till now I see it as I only make one complete song. It's Goku's Kamehameha. I don't know if you heard or seen it.
I probably haven't yet, but I'm sure I will at some point.
I was also busy with a Reddit story, but I had a lot of trouble with that. I just did not feel it somehow, and I was like, every day I was like, I listened to it, and no, this has to change, that has to change. So yeah, Joe helped me a lot with that. He finished the track like in a few hours, I think. So I was, oh, okay, that's good.
So has there been any arguments among the musicians in terms of who wants to do a specific scene? Score to a specific scene? Like, no, I want to do it. No, I want to do it. You know?
Oh yeah, a few times.
Absolutely.
And who wins the argument? Or do you just decide for them, Marcelo?
I mean, usually I let them do whatever they want. Like I said, like you'll have these jobs assigned, and then you know, so there's some things like Rakeem really wants to do, and some things Joe really wants to do. And so like maybe they'll trade off. Like, okay, you can have this Vegeta theme if I can have this Goku theme. But it's like I said, y'all are all extremely talented composers, so I'm not going to argue or try and fuddle that enthusiasm to try and like get something out of you creatively. I would say if two composers wanted to do one scene, but one of them really had like a feel for the scene or has a really good idea of what they want to do, like they have a clear vision for it, I'd say like, all right, you give it a shot then. And if they struggle with it, like we always help each other out too. Like sometimes some composers suggest sounds to use for other composers. Like, hey, this is a really creepy sound. Check Soundbank 119 or something. You know, so there really is a lot of collaboration. Rarely any actual fighting over a scene.
Well, that's good.
Because there's so many scenes to do. Like it doesn't even like matter. We all just want a complete episode.
Yeah, because because you guys would pretty much have the entire sound bank of all the samples used at this point on the score, I would assume.
Close.
How many are there?
A lot.
Yeah, easily hundreds.
Over 100?
Oh, more.
Far beyond.
Yeah. So if you're trying to compose a piece, I mean, are you sitting there going through the sound bank one by one? No, that sample doesn't work. No, I'll try this one. Nope. Next one. Nope.
We do have a Google Doc that documents a lot of familiar DBZ sounds that we have that catalog tells some tracks they're used in. For Joe, Rakeem, and Nick, they probably like have heard some of these sounds so many times they just like know what'll work and what won't work. But we do document them and try and like keep a small record just like to go to for different sounds we want to use. And it helps for me too as an editor. Whenever I want them to adjust a track or tweak something, I'm like, hey, would it work better if you guys use nose pad here, or you use 303 WWAMV? They have really weird names.
303 MW. Let's get this right.
Yeah. So it helps for me too when I want to make suggestions for tweaks, and they're like, hey, this sound might work better, or you should mix this specific sound a little quieter. It just helps us all to know the different sounds. And that document that put together, it really helps me.
So how much of a mission was it to find all the samples? On a scale of 1 to 10 in difficulty, where would it sit?
talk to Rakeem. He has done the bulk majority of that.
It took a long time.
Months,
It's been
years. Like what?
Some of us have been. I think we've all been searching for years. Actually, some sounds were super hard to find, and then some were like just there.
Wow. Is there one in particular that was just like, oh my God, what is this sample? How do I find it?
Marcelo?
Yes. The answer is yes. There is one particular sound that was easily the most difficult to find, and probably the most important sound in the Dragonballz sort of like sound library, because you hear it all the time in the show. If you're familiar with DBZ, you've heard it before, and it's in your brain, but you might not recognize it. And it's a nice little choir sound that's used in pretty much every single track, and we call it space voices. The real name is much funkier, but we just call it space voices. And we struggled for months to find that sound. It was like a miracle, like finding a breadcrumb in the ocean that we actually managed to get our hands on it, because we spent the better part of 6 months trying to get our hands on that sound.
So was there a celebration online with all you guys when that happened?
I certainly celebrated.
Oh yeah.
We definitely did.
It was like all of a sudden the gates opened, and this was all possible as soon as we had space voices.
And the thing about it is there's so many samples that you would think you can get a sound font for. It's like I was 13 when DBZ first aired with the Faulconer score. So I have been looking for a lot of these sounds for the better part of 10 years now. Like when I was in college, I started looking for these, thinking, oh, I could find sound fonts, because I heard that term and thought magically that's what it was. It is not. That particular choir cannot be accurately replicated with any type of sound font. There isn't a sound font out there for it that you're going to find. It just doesn't exist, period. But you need to use the hardware synth. And it's very consistent with all the other stuff that was used to make the score. The Alesis keyboard, the QS6, that thing, there are sound fonts out there similar to it, but you cannot do these sounds without the hardware. And that's, I think, the biggest thing I learned, is that this project isn't just about knowing how to compose the music or knowing how DBZ sounds. It's about willingness to put the financial resources into buying a lot of junk and having a very understanding spouse to be able to bring all this junk into your house and put it all together and then figure out how it works. And frankly, I have to, for my part, and I think Nick would say the same, Rakeem is the one who got us going with this. Like I've been composing stuff using Core Gadget and other just like digital samplers and stuff, but I hadn't really worked too much with hardware since. I had no clue what I was doing, and he got me going with this. Same for Nick. We got him going with this just recently. So he's been instrumental to this.
So were you doing like video calls and Rakeem would show you guys exactly how to use the hardware like that, or was it more through Messenger and email?
We've only done a handful of video calls, actually.
Okay.
90% of all our discussion has been in a group chat, where we can send samples and sounds to each other and be like, how does this sound? And like, tweak this or something, because we can send demos and sounds to each other. There's just thousands and thousands of short videos and audio clips in our group chat, through various discussions about different sounds for scenes that we want to make work.
Well, this might be a good Sorry, what were you going to say, Nick?
Rakeem and Joe also helped me set up the QS6 with the interface and all, because I had a lot of trouble making it work. It did not work in my DAW. So now it does. So yeah, we were video calling by that, in the middle of the night in my time and like early in the morning, but it worked eventually. So
Was it a small little technical thing, something minor that you overlooked when it didn't work in your DAW?
Yeah. It was. I think it was just something in the settings in the DAW. Yeah.
Yeah, that's usually how it works, right? The most simplest thing that's been overlooked that you spend hours on, days on trying to fix, and it's something that's right there.
But there's also the reality that we're working with 90s era synthesizers, and you don't go on YouTube and find a walkthrough on how to do this stuff.
That's right.
So, like, Rakeem and I think, have delved into weird forums trying to find like how to use some of the software, and even then, you don't always get the right answer. And it's just been putting the two heads together and figuring it out.
Wow. Well, that's a good segue actually into the samples. So I think Rakeem and Joe, you're gonna play some of the iconic samples of the show. I mean, there's so many iconic samples. We'd be here forever if you did all of them, but you'll do a few. Yeah, maybe just take me through some of them and how they're played, how they're supposed to be played, or how the original team played them to get the certain sound that they did.
All right. Rakeem, you want to start, or you want me to start?
You can start.
All right. How about I hit the what we call the Z guitar? That one's probably got one of the more interesting stories behind it. The Z guitar, as we call it, is something, it's a distortion guitar from a synthesizer called the Roland U20, which was released in the early 90s, I believe. The version that was used in the show is not from that synthesizer. It is a sampler from a CD called Guitar and Bass that Roland put out to be used with its S750, 760, and 770 series in the mid-90s. And so the version that we use is the version from that sampler disc. It's one of the sounds that you can't accurately replicate if you're going to do something like try and sample it from the CDs, for instance, because it plays different chords depending on the note that you're hitting. So I'll play a little sample of it here, and I'll play it live to the best of my ability. And this is actually an unreleased version of the DBZ theme from episode 73. So if you listen carefully, you can kind of hear how it changes. It's not just going up the scale of the chord, because it's a power chord. And so it is a chord every time you hit the key.
Ah, that's interesting. Right. So how long did that actually take you to work out?
That sound actually, I forget how long we've had that. I mean, we've had that sample. I had that sample before I hooked up with these guys, but didn't have the hardware to use it. So I had a sound font that was very, very close. But for our purposes, just on the off chance any of the notes sound a little different, I always use the sampler. And that's something that Rakeem showed me, is how to, that's one of the samplers that he taught me how to use. So I could 100% one-to-one accurately use the right sound that is the show sound.
That's cool. Cool. So what's next on the sample library, the iconic sample library?
Tell you what, I'll do the other one, Rakeem, and you can go ahead. This one's called Liquid Stack. It's probably...
Are we gonna do a liquid stack?
Yeah, we're doing a liquid stack. Liquid stack is a dong sound, and I can't even begin to do it justice. I'll just play it, and here you go.
Right.
And so you hear that all the time throughout the series, and it's also sometimes used on the higher sounds. And it's used all throughout, up and down the scale, and they use it mostly for transitions or for like an impact. And a lot of things, one thing you don't notice unless you really study the series, is that sound, the low one, is often paired with a kick drum. And so you get not just that dong, but you get a forceful little kick drum under it that really emphasizes whatever the moment is that they're trying to emphasize.
Because it's usually, from what I remember, that note is usually just one note, almost like a drone note sometimes.
A lot of times.
When it's played, yeah.
Oops, wrong note. Let me try that again. That's one of the Frieza motifs. And that's paired with something called, oh gosh, what's the name of that one? Rakeem, help me out here. Blade Runner. It's paired with Blade Runner, which is the main Frieza synth sound from the Alesis QS6.
Oh my
And
gosh.
speaking of, I have that here.
Awesome.
As
Perfect
one
transition.
Mhm. If you can hear this. That's Blade Runner
Yeah.
used for Frieza,
Yeah.
among some other stuff, but mostly for Frieza.
That's so cool.
Mm-hmm.
So I suppose you'll be very much looking forward to doing the Namek Saga, so you can go wild with that.
Well,
Boy,
since
are
the
they.
beginning, that's what I think we've all been excited for
Yeah.
since the start. Here's one from the Namek Saga that you might recognize. Sorry.
Oh yeah.
It's that running water sound.
Mm-hmm. Used in a lot of Namek stuff. It's called Dreamscape.
So is that so when you just hold the note, is that what plays? It's just that one note. Yeah.
Yeah, you can switch it up.
Wow.
Beautiful sound, yeah.
Yeah. Here's one of my favorites. Called High Glissz, and it's all the way up here.
Yeah.
For me, I use it in like everything. I sneak it in there.
It's a great sound.
Is that so? Were you actually playing that, or was that another one
Yeah.
that's just one note? It's just
Oh no, it sounds like you can just you can play around with it. It's not one thing.
We could write something creepy with that.
Mm-hmm.
No,
It can be used like,
creepy
in
music.
a lot of different ways. Marcelo has never told me to take it out just yet.
That's true. I have a small stipulation where I don't want to overuse Namek era sounds for the Saiyan Saga. I occasionally use them. They're fine to occasionally use, but I want them in moderation because we want Namek to sound like Namek, not Earth to sound like Namek.
yeah. Well, that's fair enough as well. It's got to have its own music identity. Because if
Exactly.
if the guys were scoring it, they probably would have done that because obviously Boo sounds very different. I mean, even iterations of Boo sound very different, and Cell, Android, so forth. So yeah. Which reminds me, actually, there was one episode where I heard the Destruction theme, and there was something over the top of it, and it was very, very well done. But I'm not sure which one of you guys did it.
Is that episode 5?
Yes.
Yeah,
was.
that's when Raditz or when Piccolo kills Goku and Raditz. That was me.
Yeah.
That was a choir. That's actually the choir from Frieza is Beaten, and it's used as our hero choir. So it was used there for both Goku getting hit and Raditz getting hit, and also just to give it that extra energy.
Ah, hey! This episode of Kiwi Talks is brought to you by Manscaped, who offer precision engineering tools for your family jewels. And I'm here to talk to you about the Performance Package 4.0. Voila! Let's detail these items quickly. So, we have the Lawnmower 4.0. Basically, if your missus tells you to shave anything below the neck area, that's what this is for. You can use it for your groin, your arms, your backside crack, doesn't matter. This is a well-optimized trimmer and it reduces ingrown hairs. This is amazing. And when you get out of the shower, you might want to use these two items here. The Crop Preserver, which is like a nice little cream for your family jewels, and follow it up with the Crop Reviver. Nice little deodorant for it. Amazing products. And on top of that, with this package, you get some boxer shorts, which helps increase your manhood, and a travel bag as well, so you can put all these goodies in there just to keep everything cleaner. So I'm happy to announce this exclusive offer. Go to manscaped.com and use the code KiwiTalks for 20% off plus free shipping. Yeah, but in terms of guitar stuff, what's going to be the approach for that? I mean, can any of you guys play guitar?
I play,
I can't.
You're just a jack of all trades, aren't you, Rakeen?
but I don't play like Scott.
That's really good.
Let's get one thing straight here.
I guess it can't all be Scott Morgan.
No.
Yeah.
There's a track in episode 4 that I worked on where Raditz is about to use what the dub refers to as his double Sunday. We prefer Keep Your Eye on the Birdie. And that one, I put in a synth guitar. And this is actually, somebody asked us on YouTube, are we going to be sticking only with the Faulconer sounds? And the answer is like 90-95% yes. This is a case where we went a little bit past that and used another synthesizer. I used a Roland JV 1080. Significantly, the ones we're using are contemporary with the Faulconer era stuff. So this is, I'm not pulling something from 2020, 2018, or whatever. This is I forget what year it was released, 97, 96, but something from then, and we're incorporating that. So I found this guitar sound that has the right balance of real and clearly synth, but is also, it works really well harmoniously with the Faulconer sounds to be able to emulate a guitar sound, because I cannot play guitar. I would hurt myself.
Good to know. So
it does sound borderline authentic, though. It's a really good track he put together. There's a nice little guitar riff at the end that I don't know. It feels very Scott Morganish.
Mm.
It does. And fun fact, it's the same guitar, a guitar that was used in the Mega Man X4 soundtrack. That synthesizer was used to make the soundtrack for Mega Man X4. And it has all or most of the sounds from that game on it, which is why I was very interested in getting that.
We call it the Zero guitar. You know, that's not what it's really called.
So do you give nicknames to all of the samples?
Well, that one in particular, its actual name is even cooler. It's Rock Your Socks. But we called it the Zero guitar just because Marcelo and I are big Mega Man fans, and so we knew that if you ask for the Zero guitar, he and I both know what we're talking about. But yeah, we give a lot of nicknames to samples because they have some weird names. The people who name these things are really creative.
Yeah, they are. Yeah, definitely. I very much agree. I've seen some sound banks, and I'm thinking, are you trolling with this name?
Space Voices itself is a nickname.
What's that, sorry?
So Space Voices itself is a nickname. That's not actually what it's called. It's something more confusing, but we just call it Space Voices.
Is that so you can remember it easier?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
We don't want to write these names out half the time. It takes forever because some of them are really bizarre. They're not like spelled normally. And it's just like, why bother? You don't even know what I'm talking about anyway. Here, Space Voices.
I actually have no idea. What is the Raditz guitar actually called?
I'd read it to you.
It's Halo
Control.
Something.
Halo Control.
Halo Control.
Yeah. Well, we've always just called it the Raditz guitar, though. But yeah, that's what.
Well, yeah. I mean, that's easier to remember than Halo Control. You say Halo Control, and I immediately think of Halo. I don't think of Dragon Ball Z at all.
The sound on the Soundbank right below that one is still within the Halo Control bank. Like, you know how on a keyboard and a synthesizer, you might get a different sound on the low keys than you do on the higher ones. That's one of the ones where if you hold a key down for like C3, for instance, you get this really beautiful acoustic guitar sound. And then you go up a couple and you get this hardcore like reverb metal guitar, which is what we're using, but it's all in the same thing.
This is such fascinating stuff. So are you guys planning on doing different iterations of pretty much all the main character themes? So obviously Goku, Vegeta, even, Frieza, the Ginyu Force.
Yeah, it mostly, the number one priority is basically what the episode calls for, because it's like there's been a lot of this was a conversation from a while ago, but there was some talk about like giving Krillin a theme, And we can still do that, but there really aren't too many like scenes where it's like, oh yeah, Krillin's theme like Krillin doesn't really have a theme in the show. He has some leitmotifs, he has some familiar sounds. He uses Silvertone a lot for his guitar, like his beach guitar is what I call it. It's called Silvertone, but I call it the beach guitar. And that's often used for Krillin, and we do that. But as far as giving him a full-blown theme, that it depends if the show calls for it, honestly.
Right. Because, like, say, for example, the Ginyu Force, the amount of iterations on that theme, obviously, when Mike first composed for it, he did, like, so many different iterations of that just within that small block. I mean, obviously, that will be right near the end of the project. So I don't know if you guys have even discussed it. But, I mean, would you even need to do another iteration of it?
Oh yeah, and like it's like I said, it's way down the line, and like as the editor, I want to focus on the here and now. Like, hey, this is what we need to be worried about. But we are all very excited to get to the Ginyu Force at the very end, and they do want to. They love the Ginyu Force. I love the Ginyu Force team. They're probably going to write 100 different iterations. Those last 6 episodes are probably going to be like 85% Ginyu Force theme.
Yeah. Yep, I can imagine so. And because obviously there's certain themes that you can't use. So Vegeta has a ridiculous amount of themes, but most of them you won't be able to use because, you know, they apply to whether it's Margin Vegeta or Super Saiyan Vegeta. So that really kind of only leaves Hell's Bells, doesn't it? And then maybe
Vegeta powers up. And Vegeta
right,
angry
yes.
from 60 or from 76. 5.
Yeah.
75.
So has there been discussions about like, okay, these are the only 2 themes that we can use, and how many new themes are you going to create?
Yeah, we have had talks about that actually. So because we're kind of limited to what we can use, we decided to write Vegeta a new theme that debuts in episode 5, because in this arc, it's like sort of the same thing with Piccolo too, where in this arc, Vegeta is a villain. He's not an anti-hero at all. He's just a straight up villain. So we wrote an evil theme for him. It's the same with Piccolo, where, you know, he has his theme on the CD. It's called "A Little Help from a Friend," but Piccolo's not a friend. So we kind of had to mold a different sound direction for him that pays tribute to that. But we're not going to use that theme for him until a certain point in the show, where we sort of change direction for his character, because that's what happens to him.
It won't fit now.
Yeah, it wouldn't work.
Yeah, because he's very much, well, he's kind of still a villain until, or an anti-hero, I suppose, until he's a full-grown hero, which doesn't happen until much later. So yeah, that makes perfect sense. So is there any particular character themes that were the hardest to write for, or you think will be the hardest to write for?
We did struggle a lot with Raditz, didn't we? We had to write like 5 or 6 different themes for Raditz, and that was all Rakeem, of course.
I would say out of all the themes, Raditz will probably always be the one that gave me the most trouble. It should only get easier.
Yeah, well, he's only in 5 episodes as well, right? So you'll only hear it in 5 episodes, and then that's it.
Well, he's back in like 2 others.
Yeah,
but yeah.
We phase out Raditz's theme. We phase out Raditz's guitar. There is a filler episode, episode 10 or 11, where Vegeta and Nappa go to a bug planet.
That's right.
And we use a couple of his slightly less associated themes. We don't use his main theme, but we do use some of his other themes just because it has the evil Saiyan alien affiliation.
So are you planning to do a theme for Nappa as well, or is Nappa kind of coming under the whole evil Vegeta theme?
we've had talk for Nappa, especially Joe. Joe's excited to get to Nappa.
Nappa actually has, at one very specific moment in episode 104, there's a flashback scene, and Vegeta, Nappa, and Raditz are talking to Frieza, and Frieza's like criticizing him for not being fast enough blowing up the planet or something. There is a bass line that is used there that Mike wrote, and I'm looking forward to incorporating that and going full-blown WWE with it and making it just like a really metal theme, but still using something that originally came from the series, and that way we can pay tribute to that. That's the only time Nappa ever has any type of musical affiliation whatsoever, and it's arguably not even a Nappa theme. It's just that's what Mike did for that scene. He wasn't making a theme for a character who's long since dead, but we could still use that. It's really, it works for the character. And so trying to think about things in that context, what would serve as a good, this was the season 1 thing, season 3 was the callback to what they did in season 1, and trying to think of it that way, we can incorporate stuff differently that way.
Right. So did you go out of your own way to find that, or did Marcelo tell you to look for inspiration, or how did you even reach that point?
That's all Joe.
I'm a huge Faulconer Productions music nerd, so I've known a lot of this stuff for years and years, like going back to 99. But that one in particular was because Marcelo was ripping late Frieza stuff, and I was helping with some of it, and that particular sequence is not rippable from the Blu-ray because of the reverb from the voices, because they're in a flashback plus being in Frieza's ship, so there's a lot of echo. And so that was another track that I deconstructed and then reconstructed 1-to-1 using the original sounds very carefully. 15 plus iterations later we got it, but that's also how I noticed what that was, because nobody pays attention to that stuff and that level of granularity until you're doing this type of thing, and then you suddenly notice it and it's like, oh hey, that's really cool.
Right. And there must be certain episodes where you're editing Marcelo and say King Kai shows up, and the same theme will probably play there as it did in the Frieza saga, like all the time. Like whenever King Kai was in the Frieza saga, it would always be that same theme that played every single time almost. So will that be the same case? I mean, are you editing and then you're like, oh yep, King Kai here. Oh, another King Kai scene. I'll just chuck King Kai here again.
So there's actually been, I've thought a lot. There's a lot of thought that went into how I'm going to handle the King Kai episodes. There's only really 3 of them. More like 2.5, but they're like whole episodes that take place on King Kai's planet. So I kept thinking to myself, I'm like, well, I'm not going to play King Kai's theme for 20 minutes. Plus, I know that's when Goku gets to King Kai, that's kind of the point in this where the story picks up again, because he just had 15 episodes of filler. So I already know my like Joe and Rakeem and Nick are going to be antsy to get their hands on those episodes. Like they're going to be tired of scoring filler. This is an actually important episode. So what I'm careful to do is I use King Kai's theme sparingly and carefully in the right moments. And I try and use it with comedic timing to some effect. So I just carefully sprinkle it here and there, and then like try and cleverly throw in a new theme without it feeling unnatural. So no, the episode's not going to be 20 straight minutes of King Kai's theme. I'm going to be very careful and put a lot of thought into how I use it for the scene.
But there must be times from an editing standpoint where you'll see an episode and a specific scene and you'll know exactly what music to use straight away. Like a flashback sequence, pretty much flashback music, right? So you'll be like, yep, that goes there.
Oh yeah, definitely. And there's even like some moments where I'll be like, okay, I know this has to go here. This has got to go here. Like just in my brain, I know this is what's going to work. I don't know.
So has this given you an appreciation of what the original composers had to do in terms of composing? Because they had ridiculously strict deadlines when they were doing it, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. And I assume you guys are all working full-time jobs while doing this on the side. So it would be pretty hardcore in terms of the workload for you guys, I'm sure.
Yeah, especially to these guys.
Yeah. No burnout yet, I hope.
Not yet.
Not yet.
Not yet.
No, I keep suggesting we take it like maybe a short break after the first 5, and then we should definitely take like a small hiatus after episode 20 before we get to the actual Saiyan battle. Like I said, we should take small short breaks, but it is good not to have creative burnout. We're all very excited to get to the good stuff, but we also want to take our time.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, you don't want to rush anything, so that makes sense. Yeah. So do you guys all help, like, say, in terms of like the musicians, if one person is feeling burned out or they've got a lot of stuff on, does someone else pick up the slack?
Yeah, well, like Nick just sort of referenced this. He was working on a flashback track from episode 2 with Raditz telling about like how the Saiyans go to other planets and conquer them and sell them in the market. And he had been struggling for that. I had very recently acquired Kurzweil K2500R, which is a synthesizer that Scott Morgan used. And that particular thing has a lot of spacey sounds. And he mentioned about how I picked up what he had given me a really good base and a really good foundation to work with off of that. I took what he did and I called it cheating because I just happened to have access to a massive array of spacey sounds that he simply did not have in his possession at the time. And so because I had all those sounds, I didn't even really have to think about too many different options. It's just they sort of told me what to use because of their existence. And so I was able to put them together with the stuff that he did and create that track. So I consider that one a very collaborative effort where, you know, we helped each other out and teamwork got to the end with a really good track.
With Vegeta's theme, what is the actual, do you know, because it's mainly 2 instruments that are used, isn't it?
The original Vegeta theme?
Yeah. How many instruments? I mean, because you'd be able to work out how many different instruments are used. From what I remember, it's like 2 or 3 or something.
It's
it's the main.
isn't it?
What'd you say, Rakeem?
Sorry, I was just saying it was like 7 or so.
Yeah, it's in that range. There's a string, a synth string called Dream Strings from the Alesis QS6, and it's actually not the preset version. The keyboard has a bunch of preset sounds on it, and then it has a mod wheel. For this particular keyboard, you turn the mod wheel all the way upward at varying levels of up, and you get different sounds. That's one of the ones you couldn't accurately replicate with the sound font because of that.
Right.
That particular theme has the mod wheel turned all the way up for the strings at the very end. The beginning is the U20, the Z guitar, and obviously the bell, the tubular bell in there throughout the chorus and the drums. And I know there's at least 1 or 2 other instruments in there, but the strings are in there throughout. You just don't really notice them. I know this because I worked on the Evil Vegeta theme and was referencing that just for some sounds. And so I mentally had to pick that one apart and figure out what all those sounds were in order to utilize them differently for something else.
I was not aware Dream Strings was in Vegeta's theme.
Yeah.
Huh.
Oh yeah, that's the whole ending. That's the entire end of it.
Surprise!
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yep.
Because how long does it take you if you're looking at a track? I mean, because Rakeem, I know you've remade a lot of DBZ songs. Do you go and try and isolate every single instrument that's being used?
In my mind.
Yeah.
Yes, I do.
It takes a long time, I'm sure.
It's very hard.
It should get easier because apparently, I'm not sure if you guys know, but Peter Jackson created this new technology to do this Beatles documentary where you can use some sort of program or algorithm and it isolates all the audio, every single layer within an MP3 or some sort of song. So that might make it easier. Maybe it'll become readily available as time goes on to make stuff easier for you guys, maybe if you're making reference.
We do
like
occasionally use something like that. Yeah, like whatever it's called, LALAL.AI.
AI, yeah, LALAL.AI or something. Which is similar software. And we've used that to isolate certain sounds. Not that they're necessarily then going to be used as samples, although we could. in certain instances, limited instances, excuse me, but that then allows us to, okay, hearing this by itself, now I know what this is. That's how we figured out that there was a kick drum under Liquid Stack half the time, because you don't hear it. And then the second you do, the second you just tell it, what is this? Where are the drums in this track? And it plays a kick drum. It's like, oh my goodness, that was there the whole time, didn't know it. So that type of technology has been extremely helpful to us in identifying stuff and then using the original sounds from our sound banks.
Because how much time do you guys spend on the mixing part before you send it to Marcelo?
Depends on the track, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, because if there's, I mean, this can happen, but obviously if a track has a ridiculous amount of layers, sometimes it can make the mixing quite hard, and it can be quite muddy if they hit the same frequency range. So then you have to lower stuff like really down in the mix quite dramatically, don't you? So how long do you guys roughly spend on mixing? Because I imagine it would be different between all three of you, and you'd all have three different styles of mixing, which you'd have to try and get and sound the same, I suppose.
Mm-hmm.
I know it all depends on the track, because I know Joe has one track in particular in episode 3, which just called like the military strategy track. And we personally both love that track. That's one of my top 5 favorite of the new stuff that we've written. And that took like over a week to finally like get mixed correctly, because there's just a lot of different like marching band instruments that some of them sounded too loud, and we had to account for how it would sound when, you know, characters are talking in the actual episode. A lot of trouble finding the right horns just to get it in, and then when the horns were in, they're like, ooh, can you lower them, you know? And there was so much mixing to do. There's like one part where like a Liquid Stack was too loud, and I'm like, okay, we need to barely hear that Liquid Stack, you know. A lot of different, that was Joe's spent like a week on that at least.
That was a huge nuisance. And to mix that correctly, what I ended up doing was actually finding concert footage. It was a Chrono Trigger Chrono Cross concert. And I looked very carefully at where people were sitting, what instruments were where, and basically just used that as a guide and pushed my instruments, you know, the panning following that as the template. And as soon as I did that, it worked really well. Just had a couple little things to adjust after that. But for that type of track with that more military cadence to it, it turned out that just going with concert hall worked really well.
Wow, simple as that. Wow.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, hey, I'm going to wrap up there. This has been amazing, guys. Thank you so much for taking time out. I imagine this would have been a mission. I mean, it's probably a mission for you guys just to all talk at one time anyway, so to arrange this is pretty difficult. So thanks for all taking the time out. So when is this being released? What's the main way of people being able to listen to the music? What's the best way of doing that? Where can they stay up to date with everything?
Well, we have a YouTube channel. That's where we're going to be uploading everything. We're going to upload just the music mixes onto YouTube. We're not going to obviously upload full episodes.
No.
But we'll make sure everything is available that people would want to see from the edit. We have we try and post regular updates on a Facebook page.
Well, hey, I think I can speak for all fans of the Faulconer score that we really appreciate what you're doing and understand it. I mean, as an audio engineer myself and a musician, I understand the momentous task that it is. So it's much appreciated. And I hope that it does a lot in terms of work possibilities, maybe, because it's a good thing to have on the resume, I'm sure. And yeah, I suppose what will happen afterwards once it's all done? Moving on to another anime, who knows? I don't know. Whatever you guys decide. GT. Do GT with the Faulconer score? Is that the plan?
No.
Or super with a Faulconer score.
That's a lifetime task right there.
Yeah.
You need a lifetime
I'll-
of that.
I'll let someone else on the internet do that.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you need a much bigger team. A second editor as well. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Cool. All right. Well, that's the show, everyone. Make sure you share, like, and subscribe, and take care.